Monkeypox on your house. Yeah, well, looks like a new biblical plague from the book of Revelations or something has been created. Been discovered. This is crazy. All right, so my name is Daniel D. This is the What's Wrong with America podcast, and we have a new pandemic. Shockingly, this pandemic was predicted by a simulated exercise involving a global pandemic. So this sounds a lot like COVID. Sounds like this is just history repeating itself. Because if you recall, with coronavirus, it came out afterwards, a simulated exercise involving a global pandemic caused by a novel coronavirus that mysteriously gained in function to jump from bats to humans. And then, they did this simulation back in the fall of 2019, and then within a couple of months, a real novel coronavirus shows up in Wuhan. Just happens to be where there was a virology lab where they were experimenting on bat-borne coronaviruses with gain-of-function research, funded in part by our very own NIDIH and NIH and whatever else Dr. Anthony Fauci was involved with. Anyway, so the prediction was, I guess you could say they did this simulated exercise that predicted a coronavirus pandemic, and wow, what happened 2 months later? Well, anyway, apparently they did the same thing with monkeypox. There was a simulated exercise back in, February of 2021, and it predicted, in the simulated exercise that involved a global pandemic caused by a monkeypox virus, which now historically monkeypox there'd never been an outbreak of monkeypox outside of Africa ever since the disease was discovered back in 1958. Yet, they decided to use this for the exercise, the simulation about a global pandemic. This virus there had never been an outbreak of it outside of Africa ever. And in the simulated exercise, there was an outbreak globally in May of 2022, May 13th to be precise. And guess what? The week of May 13th, 2022, there is for the first time ever, an outbreak of monkeypox outside of Africa. What are the odds, man? These guys, talk about they should pick winning lottery numbers or whatever, right? Because this is amazing. Their ability to predict, the timing, the cause of these global pandemics. They're batting 1,000 here. So anyway, there's that. There's the fact that they were, it could just be coincidence. Kind of like if you say, it's a coincidence that there's the lightning struck in the same place twice. It seems pretty random, right? Until you learn, somebody installed a lightning rod there. Oh, that's why it struck there twice, It sounds like somebody did something to manipulate the odds here, make it more likely. Just taking these two events, the emergence of a bat-borne coronavirus that suddenly gains in function to be able to infect humans, and then a global monkeypox outbreak. What are the odds that you would have, simulated exercises months prior to the outbreaks of these pandemics that would involve the very thing, I don't know. The odds seem pretty low, but they managed to do it. It's almost like maybe there's something else going on there. So anyway, this just happened to emerge at the same time that there's this treaty for the World Health Organization, WHO. Yep, the WHO, not the band, the World Health Organization. They have a treaty that a lot of countries have signed on to, including the United States. Well, it actually hasn't been ratified like the way treaties are supposed to be ratified. This is more by executive action by the dictator-in-chief, Joe Biden. or teleprompter reader-in-chief, I should say. I don't know who's actually running the show. But, this basically allows the WHO, not the band, the World Health Organization, to determine when there's a pandemic that requires them to step in and kind of override the public health, or take control of the public health officiating for an entire nation, right? So it just happens that as that was going to take effect, here in the United States, well, there's a new pandemic. Isn't that something? And the timing of it, so amazing. And then here's another thing. The Wuhan Biolab. So here's an article from your favorite alternative media source, Infowars.com. The Wuhan Biolab, that was the center of controversy surrounding gain-of-function research on coronaviruses, appears to have been carrying out the same kind of research on monkeypox to make it more lethal to humans, according to a report citing the peer-reviewed journal Virologica Sinica. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It sounds Latin. And the only thing I remember from Latin class in high school was like Gallia est in Europa. So I could say France is in Europe in Latin. That's pretty much it. So I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. Virologica Sinica. I don't know. Whatever. But anyway, according to this peer-reviewed journal, Virologica Sinica, the Wuhan Virology Lab. Wow. And I was joking about this, like, I wonder what the, 2022, new bioweapon model is going to be, that this lab is developing. Well, I guess we found out it's monkeypox. So here's the thing, it's like, at what point, I don't know. I mean, it's like all these coincidences that just seem so amazing. And it's not just this. I mean, so let's go back and review the history of the coronavirus pandemic. So first you get, the reports of like, all these deaths in China, and China's locking down, and they had this huge outbreak, and, everybody needs to be afraid of it. Well, first it was like, Trump was like, all right, we're going to restrict travel to China. And then the political establishment was like, no, don't do that. It's racist. And then the political left is like, oh, why haven't you locked everything down? Not just travel to China, which we can't do that because that's racist. But, let's wait a little bit. And then, oh, snap, we need to lock everything down and everybody down in their houses. And they were saying that the coronavirus was so lethal, so dangerous, it would overwhelm the public health system, overwhelm emergency rooms. People would be lining up, outside of emergency rooms. And so you couldn't even have like a funeral for your mother. Like, say your mother was terminally ill. You couldn't be at her deathbed. You couldn't say goodbye to her in person. You couldn't have a funeral for her, right? Because the disease is so dangerous, so deadly. And then George Floyd gets murdered or killed or whatever by Derek Chauvin, which was a horrific thing. Don't get me wrong, But then there's like the same public health officials that were just telling you, you can't have a funeral for your mother. In fact, the NYPD, on orders of Mayor Bill de Blasio, was going out and breaking up funerals, arresting people for having funerals, right? Because you can't say goodbye to your next of kin, to your, close friends and family who died. You can't have a funeral during a pandemic. How irresponsible. And then, by all means, go out and protest. Because the real pandemic is racism. The real virus is racism. It's even more dangerous than the coronavirus. The coronavirus, so, if you're protesting for the right causes, it won't matter that you're not socially distanced, that you're, most people are not even wearing masks. They're gathered in close proximity in, dense throngs of protesters, large mobs, gathered together, tight clusters, not socially distancing, not wearing masks. But it's okay. They're not going to get infected because the virus is actually not that dangerous compared to the pandemic of racism, right? So you say, well, wait a minute. Now this is, again, whether you protest or not for George Floyd, separate issue. The issue I'm talking about is these public health officials that 1 minute they're telling you stay in your home, don't come out, don't be irresponsible, don't protest the lockdowns, because that was something that they were upset about. People protesting the lockdowns, this is going to result in, in a huge outbreak of this illness. Funerals, send the police, break these funerals up. And we got to protest for this cause that we support politically. Oh, by all means, go out and protest. In fact, we're going to join you. There were public health, people working in medicine who were going out protesting themselves and not saying, hey, look, we know this is dangerous. We're really risking a lot here, but this is a cause that we believe in. No, it was like, you should go out too. Join us. We're all going to protest together. So yeah, it's like, this 180-degree flip-flop about the dangers posed by this virus. And it's like, you're not even supposed to notice or have a conversation about it. It's like, wait a minute, how come this virus was so deadly that we couldn't have a funeral for my mom, but it's not so deadly that we can go gather together and protest, in close proximity in the middle of a large city that supposedly is overwhelmed with coronavirus. Now, of course, if you send your kid to school, which that wasn't happening yet because everything was still virtual, but when you send your kids to school, you need to keep a mask on those toddlers. We can't have this virus getting out of hand. It's so dangerous. Mask those toddlers. But, hey, if adults want to go out and protest for a cause that Team Blue supports, well, by all means, go do it. So, there was that. There was all the incidents where you'd have the elite class, photographed at events, not socially distanced, not wearing masks. This was before even the vaccine were rolled out, And then the same people that are saying, you need to mask up, are themselves not wearing masks, are themselves not socially distancing, are themselves going to non-essential businesses, like Nancy Pelosi to her hairstylist, right? Because you got to keep that hair looking good when you're 800 years old and you're a, aging reptile, who's managed to convince everybody you're a human being for decades, and now you're in the Senate. You got to keep that hair looking right, because that's, one of the only things that may convince people that you actually are a mammal. If you're really a reptile like Nancy Pelosi is, so it was essential for her to go to her hairstylist, even in the middle of a pandemic, even not wearing a mask, even, while she's publicly stating how essential these lockdowns and these mask mandates are, right? Gavin Newsom, same thing. He's photographed next to Magic Johnson, who has HIV. Doesn't matter, because he's holding his breath. The whole time he's at Dodger Stadium or wherever that picture was taken of him with hugging Magic Johnson without a mask on, right? And Magic Johnson's not wearing a mask either. Well, it doesn't matter. You're holding your breath. Now, the ordinary people of California need to keep those masks on, especially on their toddlers. But if you're the governor, you're part of the elite class. You don't need to follow this rules for thee, not for me, right? So anyway, we've had that throughout the coronavirus pandemic. It's been nonstop hypocrisy, nonstop just 180-degree changes in the messaging. It's just like 1984. Just like how in 1984 you have the party saying we're at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia. We're at peace with Eurasia. We've always been at peace with Eurasia. And then all of a sudden the messaging changes immediately. And it's like, we're at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia. We've always been at peace with East Asia, right? It's like they just flip on a dime. And you're not supposed to notice. You're supposed to carry on as if this 180-degree change, this contradiction of what the fact was that you were so sure about only a few minutes ago, and now you're 100% sure of the opposite fact. What changed? What new evidence? Nothing. It's just the party demands it. There's a new narrative, and we have to believe it and support it and repeat it and not question it, right? There's a thing there where it's like you get people to doubt their own senses, to doubt their own common sense in the information they can see, right? Like the fiery but mostly peaceful protest, that whole meme. Well, there was a lot of truth to that. That not to the report that it was mostly peaceful, but just how that meme showed the state of affairs in the United States, where there's like a war on your mind, basically. Like, who are you going to trust? Your own common sense and your own lying eyes, or the party, the political establishment, the elites, the mainstream media? Which one are you going to, Are you going to go with the, common sense fascist notion that men and women are somehow biologically distinct and that sex is a meaningful biological distinction? Are you going to go with that common sense understanding of the world and human biology? Or are you going to believe the science, the party, the ministry of truth, whatever? Well, they did that with COVID all the time. I mean, all these flip-flops. First it was a conspiracy theory to suggest that it could have been created in a lab, that the virus could be an artificial creation of bioweapons research. Well, that's a conspiracy theory right there. And of course, that doesn't tell you whether it's true or false. It's just a label, conspiracy theory, that somehow, has this negative connotation, although there are conspiracies. There's a reason in criminal law there's conspiracy to commit a crime and not just the commission of the crime. But there are conspiracies. There's RICO statutes that allow them to go after the mafia, for example. Racketeering and influence and corrupt organization or something like that. Anyway. There are conspiracies. And in fact, there are conspiracies that have been declassified, right? Like there was a conspiracy that didn't follow through on it because President JFK shot it down, coincidentally enough, the same president who wound up getting assassinated. He shot down Operation Northwood. You can look this up, where the Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted to, and the CIA wanted to, blow up an American passenger jet and blame Cuba for it so we could invade Cuba during, prior to the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So it's like, there are conspiracies. And if you have a conspiracy theory, all you have is that somebody theorizes, hey, this is a possibility. There's a conspiracy going on. That's it. It's a theory, just like a theory of evolution or a theory of relativity or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm going to postulate this theory. Now let's test it. What are the signs that we would look for to confirm or disconfirm this? Let's see, Now, of course, I know like a lot of conspiracy theorists don't go through it that rigorously where they try to disconfirm their own hypothesis. But still, it's like just saying you have a conspiracy theory tells you nothing about the truth or falsity of it. It's just, is there a conspiracy or not, right? Well, it certainly looks like a conspiracy when you have, this coronavirus pandemic where there's all this 180-degree changes on a dime in the messaging. Oh, this one came from a wet market. And you're a racist if you suggest that it was created in a lab. And then it's like, oh yeah, it was created in a lab. Okay, never mind. Let's move right along. Never mind the fact we lied to you about that. We weren't supporting gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab, says Dr. Fauci under oath in congressional hearings. And then, turns out, we actually were. Now, did Dr. Anthony Fauci ever face any consequences for this? Did he get fired? Did he, get charged with perjury or any? No, he still got his job, still leading the NIH, NIDIH, all that, right? Dr. Anthony Fauci lies under oath, in congressional hearings. No effect on his job, no effect on his career, none of that. There's the whole thing about masks, they work. Don't say that they don't work. Then it turns out that at least cloth masks don't work. There's the vaccines. Don't try to say that there's any side effects to these vaccines. They're perfectly safe. If you say that there's any side effects, we'll cancel you. And these vaccines are highly effective. Then it turns out that you have people saying, thank God I was vaccine, that I got the vaccine and the booster 3 times. I'm triple vaxxed and I was wearing a mask. Man, I can't imagine how bad COVID would have been had I not been vaccinated and triple masked. People getting COVID multiple times after being vaxxed with the boosters and all that. And it's like, but you can't suggest that the vaccines are not all that effective, right? Or that they have side effects that could be dangerous or any of that, right? There's this whole thing with you can't trust your common sense. You can't. Where do you get good information? Because the party line, which dominates the mainstream media, changes radically every few months. It seems like there's a new fact that was forbidden yesterday. It was clearly misinformation, and then it's actually true. So just accept it and move on. Don't question what else you're being told right now that's not true. So anyway, the same people that brought us, and real quick, let me just doing this late in the episode rather than early. An ad read, a couple of things from my ad read. One is I got a Substack. It's serial fiction about the apocalypse. So it's called As the World Ends. It's at astheworldends.substack.com. Got the first installment of a new story, Billionaire Bunker. So anyway, I'm going to put a link to that Substack in the show notes. If you like apocalyptic fiction, it's kind of like a mashup of George Orwell, Philip K. Dick, and Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know. Mind-bending, but also kind of humorous, but also kind of talking about, as a premise for these stories, what's going on in the world, which seems like we have these elites who are in charge, and they're determined to sink the ship. For whatever reason. I don't know what their goal is with this, but anyway. So astheworldends.substack.com. Also, if you're thinking about podcasting, there's so much crazy stuff going on in the world. Maybe you're like, hey, I need to weigh in on it. If you want to start a podcast and you're looking for a podcast host, try Libsyn. You get up to 2 free months of podcast hosting if you go to signup.libsyn.com and use promo code DanielD at checkout. Again, that's Daniel D is the promo code you would use. Or you can click on the link in the show notes. It'll take you right there. The promo code's already built in, so you get your 2 free months of podcast hosting. And start your podcasting journey today using Libsyn. All right. And now back to what we're talking about with monkeypox. I mean, so with this, right? What are the odds that they would, with coronavirus, have the simulated exercise that actually accurately predicted it just months before the real thing? And now here we go again with monkeypox, and it just happens to be a virus that they were working on at the Wuhan Virology Lab. And in the simulated exercise, and this was from the simulated exercise was put on by a group called the Nuclear Threat Initiative, NTI, which partnered with Munich Security Conference in March 2021 to do this simulated exercise about a global pandemic involving monkeypox. The NTI, Nuclear Threat Initiative, is a group that was co-founded by Ted Turner, who also founded CNN, who brought us all the best and most reliable information about the last pandemic. And it looks like they brought us some good information in advance about this new pandemic. So anyway, and all the usual suspects were involved with it. The World Health Organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and both the Chinese and the American CDCs. Yeah, same people that brought us the coronavirus and now brought us apparently a predictive event, only last year about a monkeypox pandemic that emerged outside of Africa in May of 2022. Wow, what are the odds? Because again, and so here's a newswars.com article about it, saying how with the first case of monkeypox during the fake pandemic exercise was found on May 15th, 2022. In reality, the WHO, not the band, World Health Organization, confirmed its first case of actual monkeypox on May 13th of 2022. Since it was discovered in 1958, there has never been a monkeypox outbreak outside of Africa until the exact week the simulation predicted. Now, there's a theory you could test, I suppose. Could this be a conspiracy? Could there be some coordinated effort among, high-profile individuals, wealthy, powerful, well-connected individuals to engineer a pandemic? What would it look like if there was one, And would it look different than what we've got, which is these World Health Organizations running simulations, predicting outbreaks, and then the outbreaks happen, and turns out that the virus in question was being studied and manipulated and genetically modified in a lab. And the same people who predict that once and are involved with covering up the origins of the virus after the fact, lying about it, and then admitting it, but only after enough time has gone by that they can distract you with a new current thing. They do that with coronavirus, and then 2 years later, they do it again with the monkeypox virus. You know, what are the odds? I don't know. What would it look like if there was a conspiracy? It's crazy. It's almost like there's like the elites have, you know, if you liken it to the Titanic, it would be as if you have a captain who swears, you know, he's trying to get ready for the next iceberg, right? After you've had the ship run into multiple icebergs, and then you discover as the ship's hitting the iceberg, the elites are getting into lifeboats, and then the ship doesn't sink, and they're like, oh, that was just an exercise. And then they run another exercise. This is how we'll respond if the ship hits another iceberg. And then the ship hits another iceberg. And you're like, are you guys deliberately steering this ship into the icebergs? Like, what's going on? How are you winding up doing these exercises and getting into the lifeboats every time there's a pandemic? Now, this is only 2 times, but do you wait around for a third time? Do you say, like, well, it's probably just coincidence? You know, I'm sure they wouldn't deliberately steer us toward an iceberg. I don't know. Well, the thing is, to end on a message of hope, there's actually potentially some good in this, because the thing that we see is that if things stay the way they are, if there's no collapse or no, you know, if the existing order maintains itself in its current state, what's the end game for humanity? It seems like there's ever increasing surveillance, ever increasing, censorship, centralization of power and control, you know, at a global level. For ordinary people getting squeezed out. That just seems to be the way the world is heading. More censorship, more control, more surveillance, more corruption at the top. And so there's a guy, Rory Miller, who wrote some books, and it's kind of, you could almost call it like a philosophy of violence. He had a book called Facing Violence, which is really good and really interesting. But one of the things that he talks about in there is that it's basically if you're in a fight and you're losing, you want to introduce chaos. If you're winning, you want to minimize chaos. So what that would look like is if you're in a fight and somebody's got a chokehold locked in on you, and you know, okay, I got a few seconds before I lose consciousness because they got this chokehold, it's locked in, and I can't get out of it. So if you don't change anything, if you don't introduce any new chaos into the situation, you're going to get choked out. Like, you're going to lose. There's a 100% chance you're going to lose, right? But if, say, you throw both you and your opponent off the top of a stairwell and down a flight of stairs, well, there's chaos that gets introduced into it because you don't know how you're going to land, how they're going to land. It could be that you wind up making your situation worse. You throw yourself and your opponent down a flight of stairs. They got this chokehold. Maybe it breaks the chokehold, but now you broke your neck, falling down the stairs, right? And now you're really screwed. Or, maybe it works out. Maybe your opponent is the one that lands on their head and gets knocked out, and now you escape. So it's like you have a situation where you see if nothing drastically changes, you're going to lose. 100% chance. And so it's scary, the thought of just throwing yourself off of the top of the stairwell in this situation, because it's unknown what's going to happen. But that's the only possibility you have of escaping. Because let's say the person is like, they're intending to do you harm, kill you, whatever, and they've got this chokehold, and once they choke you out, they're going to, kill you somehow or severely injure you. And so you're thinking, to escape that, which is 100% likely to happen if nothing changes, I'm going to throw myself off of the top of the stairwell, introduce chaos, then maybe it works out. So, right, so a similar type of thing you could argue in our society today, where if nothing changes, just look at the trajectory our society has been on the last several years, right? Where, freedoms been getting tamped down, restricted, normalized. These people at the top of society in a centralized, organized fashion, rolling out lockdowns, worldwide, forcing vaccines on people for, all these things that have normalized loss of freedom that 10, 20 years ago would have been unimaginable, right? Not facing any consequences when it's shown that they lie, when they've been lying, when they've been corrupt, right? If nothing changes, what's the end game for humanity? It's almost like you look at 1984, like that's the plan. 2030, the World Economic Forum, WEF, Klaus Schwab and all his goons, have announced they've made statements. The World Economic Forum has made statements to the effect that by 2030, the Great Reset will have been accomplished. That we will own nothing, have no privacy, and yet somehow life will never have been better. You'll own nothing, have no privacy, but you'll be happy, or else, right? Like that's the end game for them. Now, if nothing changes, that's what we have to look forward to. But the introduction of chaos, well, maybe that gives us a chance. Maybe it's like throwing ourselves, they've got a chokehold locked in on us. Maybe that's the equivalent of us throwing ourselves and them off the top of a stairwell, and hopefully we'll land right so that, we'll have an upper hand and be able to escape. It's not good. It's not like the collapse of society is something that is just not going to suck. But what is the alternative? And so it's almost like we're not the ones, ordinary people are not the ones trying to collapse society at this point either. But I'm just saying, if the elites are trying to introduce chaos and collapse society in order to get us towards this predetermined outcome of a great reset where the ordinary people own nothing and have no privacy, but you better be happy or else, and the elites get to do whatever the hell they want. As we've seen during the pandemic for coronavirus, the elites, the lockdowns and the mask mandates and all that stuff doesn't apply to them. It applies only to us and to toddlers, right? But not to, elites. So what does that mean for us? The elites are now the ones introducing chaos. The elites are trying to push us off the top of the stairwell and roll us down the stairs while they have a chokehold on us, So it's kind of like they're maybe inadvertently helping us out. I don't know. Because if they don't throw us off the top of the stairs, we get choked out. We lose our freedoms and we lose our what's left of our representative democracy. What's left? It's mostly we're just an empire that's a parody of a republic at this point. But, the elites who are trying to choke us out are also trying to throw us off the top of the stairs. So maybe it'll wind up helping us out. We can only pray and hope and prepare for what's coming because they seem determined. They are going to collapse things. We're on the Titanic. They are steering the ship deliberately into icebergs, confident that they will be okay when the sink ships because they got the lifeboats. Well, it's possible that there is a miscalculation on their part. You introduce chaos, anything can happen. In times of great upheaval, there can be great reversals of fortune. You never know. Not to mention, there's the whole spiritual angle. What if the Bible predicts some of this stuff? Now, I know the book of Revelation seems to have been written about specifically events, in the 1st century AD. But, things can be true in multiple ways at the same time, especially when something's symbolic. It can be symbolically true of multiple things at the same time, right? It can be true of a current event and foreshadow a future event. Because the thing that this reminds me of is the book of Romans. This was a passage that gave John Calvin so many fits about free will and predestination and all that. But there's a passage in Romans about God hardening Pharaoh's heart and Pharaoh basically just acting out this script that, God had kind of predetermined. Like God's going to glorify himself and, bring a judgment on Pharaoh and on Egypt. And so Pharaoh has his heart hardened and doesn't listen to Moses, and the plagues are unveiled on them and all that, right? It's kind of almost like that. Like, you look at the elites and you're like, are these people for real? Like, how they're acting, what they're doing, what they're saying. Can they really be serious? Do they not see how ridiculous they look? Do they not see how obvious their con has become? Like, more and more people are waking up and seeing it. It's just obvious as day once you see it. Once you get red pilled, or black pilled, or whatever the color pill is that you're supposed to take, right? You see clearly. There's some real corruption, some real lies, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore, right? Like, how much more obvious do they have to get before people see, and more people are seeing it. Like, because I'll be honest, for myself, early on in the COVID pandemic, I bought that. I saw the stories coming out of China, and I thought, yeah, let's lock down. This seems pretty dangerous. I don't want to get it. I got it wrong, but I was based at that time on what I read in the mainstream media, outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Atlantic and the BBC. And of course, people listening to this might say, oh, you're a fool for reading those. Well, yeah, I recognize that now. At the time, I didn't. But guess what? Seeing the lies, first with the pandemic, then with the BLM narrative and the BLM protests, riots, whatever, right? Is like, okay, something's going on. There's some real fuckery going on here. These people are lying to me, and they're expecting me not to notice. And when I notice, they're telling me that, oh, that's misinformation. And then all of a sudden, oh, that's correct information. Never mind that we told you it was misinformation for months. I mean, the thing is, it's like, at some point, more and more people wake up. So there's that, and there's also the introduction of chaos, which could help us because, again, if nothing changes, if there's no upheaval, what's the trajectory that we're on? And is it a trajectory where the future looks bright for humanity, for freedom and all that? I would say, you know what? If we're going to have a great reset, all right, fuck it. Let's do it. Let's do this thing, So be ready. Local is important. Human, real life, offline connection is important. Having information and skills that aren't dependent on there being a, functioning internet, also important. So there's the whole acronym from the Army: survival. Size up your surroundings. Look at what's going on. See what's happening. Make note of things. Use all your senses, and undue haste makes waste. So this acronym for survival, somehow there's two U's. But anyway, there's size up your surroundings. Undue haste makes waste. So don't just rush without a plan. Use your senses. Use the information available to you. There's a good book by David Perrodin, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, called The Velocity of Information. Worth checking out. Remember where you are. So keep, kind of a sense of perspective on things. What's going on, where we've been, where you've been, but where your society's been, what you've seen the last few months, the last few years. Remember, this stuff is not normal. This is all relatively recent. Not that many years ago, it would have been unthinkable for people to just flat out lie so obviously and not even try to cover it up, and and not just that, but have you locked in your home for months, and have the population locked down under house arrest under false pretenses, lie about it. Comes out that not only were you lying about it, but you had something to do with this virus being created, yet you face, in the case of Anthony Fauci, no repercussions. You don't even get fired. You don't even get jailed. None of that. Remember where you are. Remember what's going on. Keep things in perspective. Value living. I think there's vanquish fear. There's two V's in survival, though, so I'm not sure which one this is. But value living, don't give up. There's been a rise in suicides and, mental health issues. And that's normal. I mean, people act like that's a shock. Why are so many people depressed? Why are like 1 out of every 5 Americans adults on antidepressants? Like, that's just fucking crazy, But it's a normal response to them. And Aldous Huxley talks about this in Brave New World Revisited, where in an unsafe, an unnatural human environment, mental distress, psychological distress is a normal response of a healthy, functioning, emotional system, right? Like if you're in a situation where there's some real fuckery going on, like it should cause you some distress, right? You're not normal if you're just like happy-go-lucky in spite of the fact that these distant global elites are micromanaging your life, and ruining your business and livelihood and all that, and taking away your freedom and lying to you and gaslighting you. Like, that should depress you. That should get you frustrated and angry enough to do something about it, So anyway, value living. Don't give in to the despair, Improvise is so see what you have available to you. See, because the time is coming where being able to be resourceful and make use of things is going to be important, because you may not always just be able to go to the store and just buy the cheap imported, gadget from China, right? So improvise. V, the other V, value living. Oh, we already said that. Vanquish fear. Look, man, shit's going to get crazy, okay? So just be confident with the grace of God, and, love and partnership and community, fraternity of people, your kith and kin, those and neighbors and whatever else. You get through it. Humanity, we're resilient as a species. We've been through a lot in different parts of the world. We live in some crazy environments, and yet we're able to adapt and overcome. So be flexible and, vanquish your fear. We'll get through it. Act like the natives. Well, that's going to be kind of different, because this is uncharted territory for all of us. I don't know if there are any real natives. The only thing here is maybe look at places that have had societal collapses and see what the people did to get through it. Which is banding together your community, your people close by, and then L, live by your wits, but for now, learn basic skills. There's still time to learn basic skills. Learn what plants are edible that grow wild in your area. Plant a garden, get some food, get some water filtration, and have the means, especially to obtain and purify new water. It's going to be important. So anyway, survival. That's what it's going to be about for humanity. But there's some opportunities. As shit gets crazy, the elites, it's possible that they'll lose control of the whole thing, and there'll be an opportunity for ordinary people to reclaim what's been taken from us: freedom, our privacy, our family. There's definitely a psyops and a concerted attack against ordinary American people and ordinary human values and ordinary human nature with all this stuff, the undermining of the family, the undermining of basic common sense norms surrounding gender and sexuality and all that. So anyway, and now there's a crisis, an epistemological crisis. Where do you get good information? How do you verify things? Like the media, the mainstream media and the mainstream, government institutions and corporate organizations and all that are captured by people under the spell of an ideological virus, mind virus, that causes them to believe some absurd things. So what do you do? Anyway, but survival. Remember that acronym. Size up your surroundings. Undue haste makes waste. Use all your senses. Remember where you are. Value living. Improvise. Vanquish fear. Act like the natives. And by natives, I mean people that have been through this before. See what's worked, learn from the past, and live by your wits, but for now, learn basic skills. Anyway, that's what's happening in the world today. We got a new monkeypox, the Plandemic 2.0. It's here. So thank you, elites. Thank you, Bill and Melinda Gates. Thank you, WHO, not the band, the World Health Organization, and Ted Turner. And now he's added to his crimes against humanity. I mean, just the fact that he founded CNN, the communist news network, would be enough to put him up there with some of the evil, villains of the past. But now he's added to that by founding this group that did a simulated pandemic exercise that accurately predicted to the exact week the emergence of a new monkeypox outbreak, which had never happened before until the very week that they predicted this exercise. Anyway, they just seemed intent on bringing the ship down. So just be ready. But God bless, God willing, we will get through this and thrive, and there will be hope on the other side. So anyway, that's the message. I'm Daniel D., and this is the What's Wrong with America podcast for Sunday, May 23rd, 2022. Don't forget to check out my Substack at astheworldends.substack.com. And if you're thinking about podcasting, go to signup.libsyn.com, use promo code Daniel D, and get up to 2 free months of podcast hosting, or just use the link in the show notes. All right, y'all. Have a great week. Peace out.